Chapter 10 of Marx's Capital is the working day. Section 1 is the limits of the working day. Let's say you know the rate of surplus value of a certain production process is 100%. So the capitalist is receiving as much value and profit from the worker as he expends on the means of production. And so necessary labor time and the surplus labor time are equal. If this is the case, do we know how long the working day is from this? Well, no, it just tells us the ratio between these two numbers. If the working day is 6 hours, the surplus labor is 3 hours. If the working day is 12 hours, the surplus labor is 6 hours. So how do we determine the length of the working day? Well, we can set some limits on it. At a minimum, it must be longer than the necessary labor time. Otherwise, the capitalist isn't going to make any profit. At a maximum, it must not be so long that the worker literally dies. The capitalist bought the labor power of the worker for the duration of the working day and wants to get everything out of it they possibly can. Marx writes, "His soul is the soul of capital, but capital has one sole driving force, the drive to valorize itself." He also writes, "Capital is dead labor, which, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor, and lives longer the more labor it sucks." Marx imagines this sort of dialogue between the archetypical capitalist and worker. The capitalist wants to maximize the use value of the labor power they bought. Quote, "Suddenly, however, there arises a voice of the worker, which had previously been stifled by the sound and fury of the production process. The worker says, 'The commodity I sold you differs from the ordinary crowd of commodities in that its use creates value, a greater value than it costs.'" Remember that commodity the laborer sold is human labor power. "What appears on your side as the valorization of capital is on my side an excess expenditure of labor power. The use of my daily labor belongs to you, but by means of the price you pay for it every day, I must be able to reproduce it every day to allow myself to sell it again. Apart from natural deterioration due to age, etc., I must be able to work tomorrow with the same normal amount of strength, health, and freshness of today." Marx continues this dialogue, noting that if the worker lives, on average, 30 years, then just like how the value of a machine is distributed into the products of his labor, the value of the labor power of the worker is expended at a rate of 1 day out of 30 years per day, or 1 divided by 10,950 per day. Because 30 years times 365 days is 10,950. And yes, I know about leap years. But if the capitalist, through the exploitation of the worker, shortens their lifespan to 10 years, a third as long, it's not like the capitalist is going to pay the worker 3 times as much for their daily labor power. The worker says, "You pay me for a day's labor power, but you use 3 days of it. That is against our contract and the law of commodity exchange. I therefore demand a working day of normal length, and I demand it without any appeal to your heart." So we have two competing interests here. The capitalist owns the rights to the labor power that they purchased, and the worker has the right to demand a reasonable working day to avoid being deprived of the value of their labor power. Marx writes that here, force decides, and the history of the capitalist mode of production is the struggle of organized capital, i.e. the capitalist class, against organized labor, i.e. the working class.